My name is Ethan Cole, and I'm 25 years old. I've spent most of my adult life keeping my head down, working hard, and staying out of trouble. But trouble, as I learned one rainy Thursday night, has a way of finding you, no matter how careful you are. This is the story I've never told anyone. I call it, My Boss's Wife Came to My House and Said I Will Live With You Now. It started on one of those damp evenings in late October when the streets glisten from rain and the air smells faintly of wet asphalt. I'd just gotten home from work, late as usual. My job at a mid-sized architecture firm in Seattle had become my entire life lately. The deadlines, the revisions, the late-night emails, they were suffocating me. But the job paid well and I needed it. I'd grown up watching my father work 3 jobs to keep food on the table, and I swore I'd never let myself fall into that kind of struggle. So, when my boss, Richard Walker, demanded 12-hour days, I complied. Richard was complicated. He was in his early 50s, tall, immaculately dressed, and carried himself like someone who owned every room he walked into. The kind of man who shook your hand a little too firmly, who made you feel like you were always being tested. And then there was Claire Walker, his wife. I'd met her only a handful of times, at office dinners or the occasional company event. She was younger than Richard by at least 15 years, probably in her mid-30s, with an elegance that didn't feel forced. She had this soft, unhurried way of speaking, as if she never felt the need to rush a sentence. I remember the first time I met her. She shook my hand and smiled at me with this warmth that felt out of place in Richard's world of sharp edges. But she was always at a distance, orbiting somewhere beyond the boundaries of my reality. Until that night, the rain had just started to ease when I heard the knock. 3 deliberate knocks. I wasn't expecting anyone. I hesitated for a second, then opened the door. And there she was, Claire Walker, standing on my doorstep, hair damp from the rain, wearing a beige trench coat that clung to her shoulders. She wasn't holding an umbrella, and for some reason, that detail felt off. Claire, I said, almost whispering her name, as if saying it too loud would shatter the moment. She met my eyes, steady, unflinching, and said the words that would reroute the course of my life. I will live with you now. The way she said it, calm, almost matter-of-fact, was more unsettling than if she'd screamed or cried. I stared at her, unable to process what I was hearing. What do you mean? She stepped past me into the apartment without waiting for an invitation, her heels clicking softly against my hardwood floor. The scent of rain and her perfume, something delicate and floral, filled the air. I shut the door slowly, my mind racing. You can't just... Claire, what's going on? Does Richard know you're here? Her expression didn't change much. Maybe the faintest flicker of pain behind her eyes, but her voice stayed steady. No, she said, and he won't. My heart thudded in my chest. This was my boss's wife. My married boss's wife. I watched as she slipped off her coat and draped it neatly over the back of my couch. Underneath, she wore a simple cream sweater and dark jeans. Not the kind of glamorous outfit you'd expect from a woman like her, but something about the simplicity made her look even more disarming. I struggled to find my voice. Claire, you can't just show up here and say you're moving in. That's insane. She turned to face me then, and for the first time, her calm facade cracked just enough for me to see something raw underneath. Fear, desperation, maybe both. I didn't know where else to go, she said softly. That sentence hit me in a way I wasn't ready for. I should have told her to leave. I should have picked up my phone and called Richard right then and there. But instead, I just stood there, staring at her like an idiot, because something in her voice made me believe her. I gestured toward the couch. Sit, please. Just tell me what's going on. She sank into the couch, folding her hands in her lap. For a few seconds, the only sound was the rain tapping faintly against the windows. Then she spoke. Richard isn't who you think he is. The sentence sent a shiver down my spine. What does that mean? I asked. She hesitated, her eyes darting to the floor, as if she was trying to choose her words carefully, or maybe decide if she should say them at all. Let's just say, things at home aren't safe anymore, she said finally. I needed to leave, and you're the only person I trust. That word, trust, hung heavy in the air between us. I barely knew her. She barely knew me. And yet, here she was, sitting in my apartment, saying she trusted me more than anyone else. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to think. Claire, if Richard finds out you're here. She looked up sharply, cutting me off with a gaze that felt almost like a warning. He can't, she said. Her tone was firm, but beneath it I could hear something fragile. I sat down across from her, my mind spinning with questions I couldn't even form into words. There was a part of me that wanted to send her away, to lock the door, to pretend none of this had happened. But there was another part, a quieter, more dangerous part, that didn't want her to leave. Because in the middle of all the confusion, there was one undeniable truth. I had always noticed Claire Walker, not in a blatant, obvious way, but in those stolen glances at office dinners, the way her laugh felt warmer than anyone else's in the room, the way she looked like she didn't quite belong in Richard's world of cold ambition. And now she was here, in my apartment. I didn't know what this meant or where it was going. All I knew was that my life had just shifted, and there was no going back. She looked at me then, really looked, and asked quietly, "Will you let me stay?" The question felt like it carried 1,000 unspoken things. I didn't answer right away. I just sat there, staring into her eyes, knowing that whatever I said next would change everything. For a long moment, I just stared at her, her question hanging between us like a sharp edge. "Will you let me stay?" I could feel my heart pounding, a dull thud in my ears, as if my body understood something my mind hadn't yet caught up to. That saying yes wasn't just about letting Claire sleep on my couch for a night. It meant stepping into something I might never be able to step out of. Finally, I nodded. "Yeah, you can stay. For tonight." The corner of her mouth twitched into the smallest smile, a strange mix of relief and exhaustion, and it made my chest ache in a way I didn't understand. She leaned back into the couch cushions, closing her eyes for a second, as if my answer had been the first moment of calm she'd felt all day. But I couldn't let that calm last. I needed answers. "Claire," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "What's really going on? You can't just show up here and—" She opened her eyes, looking straight at me. "Richard isn't the man you think he is. You said that before," I said. "What does it mean?" She hesitated, her hands folding together in her lap, knuckles white. Then slowly she spoke. "Richard controls everything," she said quietly. "Every part of my life. What I wear, who I see, when I can leave the house." I frowned. He seemed strict, sure, but her voice cut me off like a blade. "You don't understand, Ethan. It's not strict. It's frightening." She looked down at her hands as she continued, her voice trembling now. "He has these moods, dark moods, and when he's in one, I feel like I'm walking on glass. He's never hit me, but there are other ways to make someone feel trapped." I swallowed, unease coiling in my stomach. Richard wasn't exactly warm at the office, but I'd never imagined this. "Why me?" I asked before I could stop myself. "Why come here? You barely know me." She looked up again, and this time there was no hesitation. "Because you're not like him," she said simply. "And I didn't have anywhere else to go." The room felt suddenly smaller, the rain outside louder. Her words landed heavier than I wanted them to. I leaned back, rubbing my temples. "Claire, if Richard finds out." Her eyes flashed, sharp and urgent. "He can't find out. He would. I don't even want to think about what he'd do." Her voice cracked on that last word, and something in me softened. I remembered the company holiday party last year. Richard had been drinking too much, his hand gripping Claire's arm a little too tightly when no one was looking. I'd noticed the way she flinched. I told myself I imagined it. Maybe I hadn't. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything pressing down. Finally, I stood. "I'll grab some blankets for the couch." She watched me walk to the closet, her gaze heavy on my back. When I returned, she gave me a soft thank you. Her voice quieter now, almost tender. I set the blankets down. "You can take the couch. I'll be in my room if you need anything." She nodded, and for the first time that night, she looked vulnerable. Like the kind of vulnerability you don't show unless you're desperate. I turned to leave, but she spoke again. "Ethan." I glanced back. Her eyes locked on mine. "I'm not going back. No matter what happens. I'm not going back to him." Her voice carried a kind of finality that made me stop in my tracks. That night, I barely slept. I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling, my mind spiraling. What had I just gotten myself into? Because it wasn't just about Claire anymore. It was about Richard, about work, about the delicate balance of my entire life, now tilted on its axis. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee. Claire was in my kitchen, barefoot, wearing one of my oversized hoodies she must have found in the closet. The sight of her there, in my space, felt surreal, like I'd stepped into someone else's life. She turned when she saw me. "I hope you don't mind, I made coffee." I shook my head, still groggy. "No, it's fine." But it wasn't fine, because as I stood there, watching her pour coffee into 2 mugs, I realized something dangerous. Part of me didn't want her to leave. I should have told her to pack up and figure something else out. I should have drawn a line. But instead, I sat down at the table, took the mug she handed me, and let the quiet settle between us. Until my phone buzzed. A text from Richard. "Richard, we need to talk. Urgent." My stomach dropped. Claire saw my face pale and set her mug down. "What is it?" I turned the phone toward her. She went still, her voice barely above a whisper. "He knows." The text from Richard sat on my screen like a loaded gun. "Richard, we need to talk. Urgent." I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the keyboard, my pulse thundering in my ears. Claire's voice broke the silence. "Don't respond. Not yet." Her face was pale, but her eyes were steady. She was calmer than I was, which made no sense. I set the phone on the table like it might burn me. "Claire, what does he know?" She wrapped her arms around herself. "Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. That's how Richard is. He sends a message like that, and you start second-guessing everything you've ever done." The coffee on the table had gone cold. My apartment, usually my safe place, suddenly felt like a trap. "I should meet him," I said. Her eyes snapped up to mine. "No, don't." "Claire, he's my boss," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "If I ignore him, he'll get suspicious. More suspicious." She hesitated, biting her lip. "If you go, don't tell him about me. Not a word." I looked at her, and for the first time, I saw real fear crack her calm exterior. By noon, I was in Richard Walker's office. His office was exactly what you'd expect from a man like him. Glass walls, mahogany desk. The skyline of Seattle sprawled behind him like a painting he owned. He didn't stand when I came in. He didn't smile. "Ethan," he said, his voice smooth but cold. "Sit." I sat, trying to keep my breathing even. Richard studied me for a moment, his blue eyes sharp, calculating. Then he leaned back. "You've been distracted lately," he said. It wasn't a question. Cleared my throat. "Just tired. Deadlines, long hours." He cut me off with a wave of his hand. "Don't insult me." The words landed like a slap. He leaned forward, his elbows on the desk. "I know when one of my people is hiding something. And you, Ethan, you're hiding something." My throat went dry. I thought of Claire in my apartment, her coat draped over my couch, her voice whispering, "I will live with you now." I thought of how Richard's hand had gripped her arm too tightly at that party. I thought of how she'd said, "I'm not going back." And for the first time in my life, I lied to my boss. "I don't know what you mean," I said, my voice steady even though my heart was trying to escape my chest. Richard stared at me for what felt like forever. Then, slowly, a smile curled at the edge of his lips, one that didn't reach his eyes. "Good," he said finally. "Keep it that way." I left the office feeling like I'd walked out of a cage I hadn't even realized I was in. When I got back to my apartment that evening, Claire was sitting on the floor, surrounded by a few of my books, her bare feet tucked under her. She looked up the moment I walked in, searching my face. "What happened?" I tossed my keys on the counter. He knows something's off, but not about you. At least, I don't think so. She stood, crossing the room toward me, her expression shifting between relief and guilt. Ethan, she started, then stopped, like the words were too heavy. I turned to face her fully. What? Her voice softened. You didn't have to lie for me. I let out a bitter laugh. Yeah, I did. Because if he finds out you're here. Her hand touched my arm, stopping me. For a second, the world went quiet. Her fingers were warm against my skin, and when I looked at her, I saw something in her eyes. Something that wasn't just fear. Something that scared me even more. Because I realized, in that moment, that I wasn't just protecting her because she needed help. I was protecting her because I didn't want to lose her. That night, the tension between us was unbearable. She stood by the window, looking out at the rain-slick streets, her hair falling over one shoulder. You shouldn't have to do this, she said quietly. Risk your job, your life. I moved closer without thinking, standing beside her. What's the alternative? Send you back to him? She turned to me, her eyes shining in the dim light. I don't want to go back. I don't remember who moved first. One moment we were just standing there. The next she was in my arms, her breath warm against my neck, her body trembling. Her lips found mine, soft but desperate, and for a second, I forgot everything. The lies, the danger, the man who could destroy me. It was just her. But the moment shattered as quickly as it came. She pulled away, breathless, her hand covering her mouth. I shouldn't have done that. I stepped back, my heart still racing. Claire. She shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. You don't understand, Ethan. If Richard finds out. The rest of her words were drowned out by the sudden, sharp sound of my phone buzzing on the table. I grabbed it, my stomach dropping when I saw the name. Richard. Calling. Claire's face went pale. I stared at the screen, frozen, as the phone buzzed again, louder, more insistent. And in that moment, I realized something chilling. Richard wasn't just suspicious. He knew. I didn't answer the call. The phone buzzed in my hand, once, twice, then fell silent. But silence didn't feel like safety, it felt like a countdown. Claire was standing perfectly still, her hands clenched at her sides, eyes fixed on the screen like it might explode. What do we do? I whispered. She shook her head slowly. It's not what we do. It's what he will do. The words sent a cold chill down my spine. The next day was worse. Richard didn't text again. He didn't call. He didn't summon me into his office with that commanding tone. Instead, I heard whispers at work about how he left early, about how his car wasn't in the garage. The quiet was more terrifying than confrontation. By evening, I went home with a knot in my stomach, the city streets blurring past like streaks of gray. Claire was waiting in my apartment, sitting on the floor again, her knees hugged to her chest. Her voice cracked when she said, "Something's coming, Ethan. I can feel it." She wasn't wrong. The knock came at midnight. Hard. 3 sharp raps that made the walls shake. I froze. Claire froze. We both knew who it had to be. "Stay here," I whispered, though my voice sounded far braver than I felt. I walked to the door, every step heavier than the last, and opened it. And there he was, Richard. His immaculate suit was rumpled. His tie was missing. His eyes, cold, sharp, unblinking, met mine, and for a second I couldn't move. "Ethan," he said smoothly, as if he'd just come by for coffee. "Can I come in?" It wasn't a question. I stepped aside. The moment he walked in, the room felt smaller. He scanned the apartment slowly, his gaze like a searchlight, until it landed on her. Claire, standing near the couch, wearing the same cream sweater from the night she'd arrived. She didn't speak. Neither did he. The silence between them was thick, suffocating. Finally, Richard turned to me. "I should fire you," he said calmly. My breath caught. "But I won't, because this isn't about you." He looked back at Claire. "It's about her." What happened next felt like something out of a dream, sharp and unreal. Richard stepped closer, his voice low but cutting. "You think you can leave me, Claire? Move into my employee's little apartment, playhouse, and I'll just let you go." Claire's hands were trembling, but her voice didn't waver. "I'm not going back." His jaw tightened. "You will," he said, stepping closer. "Because you belong to me." The words made something inside me snap. "Enough," I shouted, stepping between them. Richard's gaze cut to me, cold and almost amused. "Careful, Ethan. This isn't your fight." "Yes, it is," I said. My voice surprised me. It didn't shake. "Because she's here. Because you made it my fight when you showed up." For the first time, Richard's calm cracked. His nostrils flared, his voice rising. "You think you know what you're doing? You think you understand her?" He pointed at Claire like she was an object. "She doesn't stay, Ethan. She runs. And when she's done with you, she'll run from you too." The words hit me like a punch, but I didn't move. Claire stepped forward now, past me, her voice sharp and sure. "He's wrong," she said. "I'm not running anymore." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Richard laughed. Low, bitter, dangerous. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice dropping to something almost like a whisper. He turned to me one last time, his eyes like ice. "And so are you." He didn't yell. He didn't slam the door when he left. He just walked out, slow and deliberate, like a storm receding, but promising to come back. When the door clicked shut, the apartment felt too quiet. Claire sank onto the couch, her hands covering her face. I stood there, my chest heaving, every muscle in my body still buzzing with adrenaline. Finally, she looked up, her eyes shining with tears. "Why did you do that?" she whispered. "Because someone had to," I said. She reached for my hand then, her fingers cool and trembling, and I sat beside her. For the first time since she'd shown up, she leaned into me fully, resting her head against my chest. "I don't know what happens now," she murmured. "Neither do I admitted. But for the first time, that didn't scare me as much. Weeks passed. Richard didn't come back. He didn't call. Rumors at work said he'd taken a leave of absence. Some said he was selling the firm. Others said worse things. Claire stayed, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she chose to. One night, as the rain tapped against the window again, she asked me quietly, "Do you regret it? Letting me stay?" I thought about the fear, the danger, the way my life had tilted and almost shattered. Then I thought about her laugh in the kitchen, the way she looked at me like she could actually see me. "No," I said softly, "I don't regret it." Looking back now, I realize how close I came to losing everything. My job, my safety, maybe even my life. But I also realized something else. Sometimes, life throws you into chaos, and you're faced with two choices. Protect yourself and turn away, or step in and risk everything. I stepped in, and even though it nearly broke me, it also led me here, to her, to this strange, fragile, beautiful life we're building out of the pieces. Because sometimes, the people who show up at your door uninvited are the ones who end up changing your life forever.